let's watch this interview between Piers Morgan and Naftali Bennett. Let's watch. Okay, did somebody link it? JSD, I think you linked the thing. Dope. Karine Rainia stated that there was no evidence of children's beheading by Hamas reported earlier in the war. Even your network reported Israeli found butchered in Israeli kibbutz. But when you read the story, it hadn't been independently verified. Ooh, man, I don't know how to read that, actually. I don't know how to take that. Is that her saying that nobody got slaughtered, nobody got butchered, which we know isn't the case? Or is it just she's saying that no children were specifically beheaded? Because personally, I don't think it matters if the child was beheaded, if the child was shot in the head, if the child was burnt alive. At the end of the day, you're murdering children. So at this point, we're kind of like splitting hairs. And I think that the beheaded children have become a little bit of a red herring. As far as I know, we have yet to have specifically the beheadings independently verified, but children were killed by Hamas. They were. So I don't think like the method by which they killed the child changes whether they killed children.
Gave Atrelos a tier 1 subscription. Before we move on, I propose a debate with monarchs around the world. We can call it the Hippy Dippy Royal Rumble.
That's a brilliant idea. It's a good fallback plan if this war reporting stuff doesn't work out. Anyway, as I was saying, that's, yeah, no, it's hard to read that. Either way, though, I agree with her critique of the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza, the Jordanian queen, but her statement about Hamas's war crimes in southern Israel borders on, if not sounds just like denial of war crimes. I don't know, the hyper fixating on the beheaded baby stuff, I feel like is a little bit of a red herring. But let's watch this interview between Piers Morgan and Naftali Bennett. Let's watch.
First question.
Again, Naftali Bennett, former Prime Minister of Israel.
I guess, do you think he was right to say that you've eliminated thousands of terrorists? Hamas is claiming, and we have to take their figures at their word, and I'm not sure how credible they are, but they're claiming 7,000 Palestinians have died since October the 7th. But we don't know how many of those...
When he says Hamas is claiming, I think he means the Gaza Health Ministry, which has a minister headed on it, at its head, which is a Hamas member, like it's a Hamas, not a Hamas cabinet member, but like a Hamas official. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. While I don't think we should immediately take the numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry at face value, especially if the numbers come out like super, super duper quickly, like what happened with the hospital bombing. Immediately we got the number 500 and then it was later readjusted, like stuff like that. It makes sense for you to pause and be like, wait, let's wait until we have some photographs and some videos and more confirmation.
A curd is a curd.
I'm going to be blunt with you guys.
Blue Rider of Neptune got a tier 1 subscription. Piers Morgan has been in the news a lot lately. There one which was pretty good where he teaches Fox News about red flag laws.
Oh God. I don't want to get into the gun debate right now. I'm pro red flag laws. I'm not pro banning like AR-15s and stuff like that. But it is interesting to engage with people now that I've been more outside of the United States who just look at us just completely cockeyed and this head just turned just bizarrely when I try to explain our mentality around guns. Oh God, what was I saying? Oh, I was saying something and then I was derailed by thinking about gun control. Somebody help me get back on track. Naftali Bennett, Piers Morgan. Oh, Gaza Health Ministry. So the Gaza Health Ministry numbers, I think, can basically be trusted. And when I say basically be trusted, I don't mean like trust them at face value, but I think that they have a general record of being in line with the death tolls when their numbers are examined by other NGOs. I'm not the only person to say this. Human Rights Watch has said this. Other NGOs have said this. And so until we see a large discrepancy between the numbers that are being put outside of by the Gaza, sorry, I'm fumbling everywhere. The gun control thing really set me off. Until we see a big discrepancy between the Gaza Ministry of Health and what other NGOs are reporting on the ground about the death toll, until we see evidence stack up against their death toll. And I don't mean screenshots of somebody supposedly getting up in a body bag that turns out to be like Halloween costumes later. I mean real evidence. Then I think those questions can be raised up and we can start having that debate. Until then, I think they can generally be trusted as a source for the death toll on the ground, especially since there's just not many other death tolls sources for death tolls on the ground.
Are terrorists and how many are completely innocent civilians, do we?
Well, Israel and the IDF always target the Hamas terrorists. Yes, sometimes the Hamas terrorists use civilians as human shields, but I wouldn't trust Hamas's statements as we.
The thing that gets me about this is that it's true that Hamas uses human shields. They've integrated their military infrastructure into civilian infrastructure deeply all across the country, and they don't really even hide that. It's not an unknown. Every serious geopolitical player in the situation understands that Hamas does this. But that doesn't mean that Israel restricts its bombing campaigns to make sure that they're only striking the targets that they absolutely have to. They have been pretty reckless with their bombing campaign. I think one of the more evident examples, and this is something that the Israeli government admits to, is when they bombed the 12th century. I mean, it doesn't start specifically in the 12th century. It actually goes back further. People who practice at the church will drag it back all the way, I think, to the 5th century. But a 12th century Greek Orthodox church that was bombed by the Israeli government. It was protecting parishioners and displaced peoples from other part of the country, and they openly admitted they were trying to take out Hamas HQ, and they ended up. They said they collapsed one of the walls of the building, but that ended up killing 16 to 18 people in the church compound. There was no Hamas operatives, as far as we know, and I don't even think the Israeli government claims that there was Hamas operatives on the church grounds. So the idea that Israel just strikes Hamas targets that are integrated with civilian infrastructure, and that's it, that's all that happens, that's just not true. We know that's not true. Israel has admitted to it.
Saw just a few days ago.
That's not even to talk about.
It was Islamic Jihad who shot a rocket at.
That's not even to talk about different examples of the Israeli military targeting civilians from the past, like on the border with the snipers that recorded it for fun. But just in this specific military engagement, civilians not associated with Hamas military embankments, Hamas military locations have been killed.
Just a few days ago, it was Islamic Jihad who shot a rocket at a Gazan hospital. Hamas claimed it was Israel. The whole world echoed that for about 24 hours until it turned out that it's a total lie. And we
really still don't know. And there's more evidence stacking up that I saw published by, was it I don't think it was AP, but there's more evidence stacking up that the rocket that we saw in the video actually might have not struck the hospital. We're getting reports from CNN, reports from AP, reports from all these different news organizations saying that obviously the picture is still not clear, and Israel has certainly not been proven innocent of conducting a strike on the hospital. But as of right now, the picture is still not clear, but he's the former prime minister of Israel, so Israel's innocent. But right now, we still don't know.
Indeed was Islamic Jihad. So I wouldn't assign too much weight to their words, especially given that they're a group of rapists and murderers. So why would you trust them?
No, I completely concur that you don't have to take their figures just because they say these are the figures. But what is clear is a lot of civilians.
Also, can I just be blunt? Civilians have been targeted in the West Bank, which isn't even, supposedly there's not even supposed to be a military operation going on in the West Bank. It's only supposed to be happening in Gaza. But civilians in the West Bank have been killed, and specifically killed in lynchings by Israeli settlers. And the Israeli military has done nothing to try to stop the violence. The Israeli military has done nothing to find and capture and arrest and sentence the people who are responsible for these lynchings. And I'm calling them lynchings because I see Israeli settlers go up to Palestinians, hit them with their gun, and then shoot them in the stomach. What conclusion am I supposed to come to when I see like a 15-year-old kid get shot in the back of the head by an Israeli settler? What other conclusion am I supposed to come to outside of, well, that's a lynching? And there has been no real action taken by the Israeli government to try to reel in that type of settler violence. But this isn't even a recent phenomenon. That type of settler violence has gone on before. It has gone on before in other waves of violence between Israel, Hamas, Israel, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Israel, and different Palestinian groups. So this isn't even a recent phenomenon, but it just flares up anytime there's a wave of violence between Israel and different Palestinian militant groups.
Innocent people, as well as, I presume, some terrorists are being killed so far.
Send it, where, proof, or just words? Okay, I've already reposted one of those videos on my main Twitter account. You'd have to go back, like, I think a week or two to find it. I think it was around October 18th or 17th, some date around there. But I cannot show you footage on screen right now on Twitch with Twitch's TOS of a 15-year-old getting shot in the back of the head. And I cannot show you footage on Twitch of a guy getting shot in the stomach. Okay? So, but I posted that link, like, it's a few weeks old. As for the other link, I actually have it in my Discord. If you really want it, you can message me on Discord and I'll send it to you. And it was an Israeli publication that was covering it.
By the Israeli response with the airstrikes. It's clear also that a major ground invasion will massively increase the number of innocent people who die. And I've asked this question to a lot of guests in the last 3 weeks. I'll ask it to you. What is a proportionate response? Because people are already saying, look, 1,500 people in Israel were killed. It was barbaric. It was evil. It was an act of horrible terrorism. But if 7,000 people, or several thousand, and whatever the correct number is, have already been killed in Palestine, what is the number which becomes unpalatable even for people on the Israeli side?
So it's not about...
he's not going to give a... number one, he's not going to give a number. And is that number is going to... And look, here's a prediction. I haven't watched this interview in advance, but it's going to basically be like anything to bring justice. It's... he's not... What is he going to say? 10,000. That's our number.
Proportionality to what happened. It's about preventing what will happen.
Yeah,
what we've realized is that we have a ISIS state on our border. People who will rape, murder, dismember bodies, kill babies from point blank. So it's not about what happened. It's about the future. How do we protect and defend Israel? There's only one way: total eradication of Hamas. So when you think about proportionality, it's not about the numbers. It's about how we get them out. But I will say,
you know, when I hear these statements about total eradication of Hamas, there's no way for them to achieve total eradication of Hamas. They could achieve territorial control of the Gaza Strip after a brutal months-long military campaign. They can achieve that. But the idea that they're going to stop all of the Hamas fighters from fleeing in tunnels into Egypt, or fleeing into tunnels into other locations, or fleeing to Jordan, or they'll be able to get the Hamas officials that are in Qatar, they're not going to be able to eradicate Hamas. When you're talking about groups like Hamas, that's just not how... You don't just destroy the territorial control here and then they just disappear. Same thing with ISIS. We took away all of ISIS's territorial control in Iraq and Syria. But after the Turks invaded northeastern Syria, ISIS activity spiked in the region. Assassination of village elders, bombing attacks, targeting of civilians, propaganda campaign. And the reason why is they simply went underground. Some of them fled, maybe to Libya, maybe to other locations. Others went underground into the middle of the desert and found locations to hide in caves and underground tunnel systems. They tried to hide amongst the civilian population and waited for the opportunity to strike, tried to recruit again. There was, of course, that big ISIS operation on the prison to try to break out a bunch of prisoners and try to recapture those who had been captured by the SDF, the YPG, the YPJ. And so, obviously, ISIS and Hamas, right? They're two very different organizations with different motivations, different goals. Hamas has, as far as I know, Hamas does not have a plan of global jihad. The closest you can get to that is them saying they want to find like every Jew and kill like. I got to be careful about my recent demonetization. They want to find every Jewish person and hurt them until they're gone. You'll get statements like that. There's no like global territorial conquest ambition. There's two different organizations, but when it comes to the hiding and the being able to go underground and be able to cross state borders, it's an interstate organization. Hamas can do that just like ISIS did that, just like other organizations like Al-Qaeda did that. And so if Israel really wants to destroy Hamas, it's not just going to be an invasion into the Gaza Strip. It's going to have to be special operations forces around the region. It's going to have to be trying to negotiate with different governments to stop sheltering Hamas. It's going to be a lot more than that. It's going to be a multi-year operation, not a multi-month operation, which an invasion of the Gaza Strip would be.
Piers, that IDF is very focused on preventing unnecessary deaths. That's why we went out of our way, according to international law, and we allowed roughly 800,000 Gazans from northern Gaza to evacuate away from harm's way. So in the theater of operations, as has been already made public, is going to be primarily northern Gaza, and we're allowing ample time, giving precaution, warning, bending over backwards to reduce the amount of civilian casualties.
But what happens to those 800,000 Gazans if all their homes are completely destroyed? What do they come back to? Do they come back?
This is such a good question for Piers, and I'm very happy he asked it. This is my main problem. By the way, I saw that link from Sards in chat of an example of Israeli going to jail for murdering Palestinians. My point is that those settlers right now are basically getting away with it, which happens often during flare-ups and violence, even though there are also those types of attacks when, during, I don't want to say the off season, this isn't football, like the Palestinians and the Israelis are at it again at the World War Super Bowl. But during periods where the violence isn't as spiking as much, they still happen. I'm not saying that nobody gets arrested. I'm saying that a lot of people get away with it, and there are protections put in place for the Israeli military for these people who have engaged in, quite frankly, lynchings.
Can't come back. Where do they go? Where do they live?
Look, Israel's responsibility is not to provide housing and high quality of lives to an enemy state. I don't recall America or Britain asking those questions about Japan or Germany during World War II. Our goal is to minimize civilian casualties, but our main goal is to eradicate ISIS, Hamas. That's the main goal. Now, in the southern part, which is...
Okay, so I'm going to be blunt with you guys. Before you invade a country, you have to have a plan afterwards. You have to have a plan afterwards. But before the invasion of Afghanistan, John Bolton's plan was the equivalent of invade, fuck up Al-Qaeda, fuck up the Taliban, drop the Constitution, peace out, outie, right? That was John Bolton's plan. I don't think it's a good plan, but that was his plan. There were a bunch of other plans floated around, but by the time we had gotten into Afghanistan with the Northern Alliance and engaged in a campaign to push the Taliban out of the country and had them on the run, and Osama bin Laden was getting out of there, fleeing into Pakistan, we still didn't have really much of an after plan. Americans did not know if we were going to be engaging in just anti-terrorism operations, of nation building, etc. And so him saying like, oh, it's not our job to, care about the standard of living. If you're going to be an occupying force, that will quite literally be your job, unless your plan is to ethnically cleanse all the Palestinians, kick them all out, force them into Egypt, which the Egyptian government said could be the Israeli government's plan, and is part of the reason why they want to keep Palestinians there, even though much of it is self-interested. The government of El-Sisi isn't some, bastion of love and appreciation for the Palestinian people, especially since Hamas has deep ties with the Muslim Brotherhood, which El-Sisi doesn't like because he overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt. But I want some detail about what you go in, you beat up Hamas, you go through the tunnels, bunch of people die, bunch of people lose their homes. Then what? I think people have a people have a recent enough memory of Afghanistan to want to hear an answer to this question.
Sort of the safe haven area, or we've created safe haven corridors. We are allowing anyone to provide water, food, and medicine in safe haven corridors. So we're about protecting lives. The fact that thousands of Gazan and Hamas citizens and terrorists went in and raped and killed Israelis, yes, it has meaningful consequences that they brought about themselves. I also want to point out that contrary to what people think, there were also many Gazan civilians that entered Israel, and just horrible things. For example, we have evidence in videos of Gazan civilians coming out and saying, that girl, we don't want to murder, keep her for rape. I want to rape her, that one we murder, that one we take hostage. So it's, the notion that Hamas is totally divorced from the massive public support of Gazans is untrue. Having said that, we still are going out of our way to allow the citizens away from harm's way.
So I really don't like, and I know that there are Palestinians that support Hamas, but I really don't like the tying of the Palestinian civilian population to Hamas as they're about to engage in a military operation into Gaza. We know that 65% of Palestinians wanted to keep the ceasefire with Israel. We have no reason to believe, outside of, videos of some people in the street going, yay, woohoo, that the majority of Palestinians supported the military actions on October 7th or wanted a fresh war with Israel. So there does seem to be some sort of a divide between the actions and interests of Hamas and the actions and the interests of the Palestinian people in Gaza.
Queen Rania of Jordan was very vocal this week, gave a very impassioned interview in which she accused Israel of being an apartheid regime, said that there's always a distinction in the West between Israel's right to self-defense against any right of Palestinians to self-defense, which is always categorized as terrorism. She said that whilst what happened on October the 7th was savagely barbaric, why is that terminology never used about what Israel does to Palestinians? What was your reaction to Queen Rania and that interview?
Well, she totally lied and said simply wrong and reprehensible things. Let's unpack this. She talks about apartheid. Let's talk about apartheid. There's about 1.5 million Israeli Arabs. They vote in the elections. They have one ballot like I do. There's over a dozen Arab members of Knesset. We have Arab Supreme Court judges. So we have Arabs even serving, some of them in the military. They enjoy full equal rights in Israel. So saying that Israel is an apartheid state simply has nothing to do with the facts. If she wants...
So man, I don't know how to approach this really. So I'm just gonna, because I don't know where to start first. So I'm just gonna be blunt in a few areas. The first thing is that in Jerusalem, for the Palestinian population in Jerusalem, they are unable to vote in elections. The only thing that they can vote for and are allowed to vote for is basically a symbolic mayoral candidate. So I don't think that's a very pro-democracy, treating, Israelis and Palestinians as the same way. Then, of course, there is the occupation in the West Bank and the continued expansion of settlements and treating of Palestinian property rights as a secondary concern. There's a bunch of problems and humanitarian abuses that the Israeli government continues to perpetuate against occupied Palestinians, against occupied Palestinian communities, against Palestinians in Jerusalem and others. I don't know if I really want to spend the next hour splitting hairs over every single issue. I just wanted to express that Palestinians are not empowered in Israel. Palestinians in occupied territory are not empowered politically, financially, or when it comes to just basic property rights. Not to mention, when you're living under an occupation in the West Bank, there is a lot of fear for the Palestinian population there that if they leave the West Bank, that if they leave for a period of time to visit family or to do, whatever they want to do abroad, that their homes could be overtaken in that period of time by settlers. Definitely when we know how militant and how radical and how far right many of these settlers, I would even say a very decent chunk of these settler communities are.
Bring some facts to substantiate her lies. I challenge
like
her.
When an Israeli person in Tel Aviv leaves to go visit their family in New Jersey for a few weeks and comes back, there's no fear from those people that they're going to come back and their home was overtaken by somebody who says that they have the right to this land. You didn't actually have the right to this, no matter how long your family lived there.
Bring me facts that show that Israel's apartheid. A. B. Regarding the barbarism and savagery of Hamas, Israel never, in our 75-year history, did anything near what they did. I want to explain. I today spoke to...
I don't want to get into specifics of, did they ever specifically, this Israeli government, or officially under the banner of the Israeli government commit something precisely like this. I don't know if they committed something that's precisely like this, but the Israeli government did have a plot during the 1948 war to poison Palestinian wells to force civilians to flee. They did displace hundreds of thousands of Palestinians during the Nakba, which translates into the catastrophe. That's what the Palestinians call it, while Israelis call it the War of Independence. What a devastating thing to call a historical event. The catastrophe. You can really feel the weight on that. The deliberate targeting of civilians has been done by IDF soldiers. It was widely covered by NGOs and the international press, even if it wasn't covered as much in the American press, of Israeli IDF soldiers targeting civilians on the border with Gaza during border protests, like sniping kids, sniping people, shooting out their legs while recording it on their cell phones. And the only reason we even know about it is because it was leaked by one of the soldiers that was part of the unit that was practicing those types of war crimes. Of course, I could talk about any of the instances where civilians were killed in bombing campaigns. There's all these different instances where I could talk about where Israel has committed crimes. I'm not even talking about like the terror movements that the Zionist terror movements that were sponsored and worked during the 1940s and 1950s, like the Lahai. I don't know if you guys, that's not how you pronounce it. It's like the Lahai, but I'm a Yankoid, so I don't know how to do the ch sound. For those of you who don't know, the Lahai was a terrorist organization, a Zionist terrorist organization that believed that the Jews had a right to all of the land, and they were willing to basically do anything in order to achieve it, even cooperating with the Nazi government of Germany in trying to propose some sort of a working relationship. Now, people will defend it to high heaven, saying, well, you don't have all the context because, they were trying to save as many Jews during the Holocaust as possible. But also they were willing to work with the Nazis in their war aims, or at least were espousing that. Either way, they openly called themselves a terrorist organization, and they engaged in, well, terrorism. And the Israeli government does celebrate those people. When their members die, who were part of that terrorist organization, everybody in the country gets, well, not everybody in the country, but the government will come together and clap. They have awards named after it. The idea that the Israeli government or the Zionist movement is disconnected from terrorism or the deliberate targeting of civilians is silly from a historical perspective. It's just any knowledge of the conflict would dispense that idea.
Family, the Zach family, the parents and the younger brother were murdered. They were waiting in the shelter, and the sister Hadar was not there. She told me that the dad was holding the shelter handle so the terrorists can't come in. What the terrorists did, they burnt the whole house and suffocated the mom, the dad, and young brother Sagi. His only comfort was they found Sagi and his mom hugged on the bed in the shelter as they were suffocating. This is something that no decent person would ever do. So shame on Queen Renaya, shame on her. And the fact that she can say these blatant lies is simply deplorable.
Many people in Israel, 80%, I think, in the latest poll, believe that...
Somebody in chat is saying, so Lahai was called by the British Stern Gang by practically 95 opposed. Sorry, you said opposed? I assume you mean opposed, by practically 95% of the population. I'm not saying that the vast majority of Israelis love the Lahai or all their fighters or anything. What I am saying is that their fighters are commemorated. Netanyahu's government and many people in Netanyahu's far-right coalition have commemorated those people and have, I think there's even at least one award named after them. Now, I'm not saying that to paint every Israeli with a bad brush, but it's not like this group is unknown in Israeli history. It's not like this is some unknown quantity, and they openly called themselves a terrorist organization and engage in terrorism. So I'm just saying that Zionism and the Zionist movement is not a stranger to terrorism and hate-fueled violence.
Benjamin Netanyahu should express some personal responsibility and apology for the catastrophic failure of security and defense on October the 7th. You have now said publicly that you feel responsible for what happened on your watch as Prime Minister, which may have contributed to the failings. Why has Benjamin Netanyahu not done the same, and should he?
You'd need to ask him. I don't want to stand here and criticize Israel's Prime Minister. I may have profound differences and thoughts, but I have a habit where I don't criticize Israeli leaders during war, and certainly not in international press.
But there's no doubt it was a catastrophic failure, and he is the guy at the top. If you had been Prime Minister, which you were several years ago, and this had happened on your watch, would you have resigned?
I don't want to go into that because, again, it's domestic Israeli politics. I have my set of ethics and standards.
What the fuck? What is that supposed to mean? You know, I was the Prime Minister. Don't ask me domestic political questions as a political leader going on TV to talk about politics and why we should bomb Gaza. Don't ask me. Don't ask me how this happened or the culpability of the. No. Don't ask me about politics. You know, ask me about the foreign politics. You know, just ask me how many ways we're gonna bomb the Palestinians. Don't ask me about the domestic political issues as the former Prime Minister of Israel. What would give you the crazy idea that the former Prime Minister of Israel would answer questions about Israeli politics?
That I adhere to for all my life. You have to send all these questions to Prime Minister Netanyahu. We've got a war to win.
Both President Biden and indeed Queen Rania and many others are saying that the only way this gets resolved is politically, with people getting around a table. I think it's pretty clear that cannot be done as long as Hamas are in charge of Gaza. And certainly depends if there's any Hamas left at the end of this ground invasion anyway. You said in June 2013 the following. You said, I have a friend who's got shrapnel in his rear end, and he's been told it could be removed surgically, but it would leave him disabled. So he decided to live with it. There are situations where insisting on perfection can lead to more trouble than it's worth. And your quote, which became known as shrapnel in the butt, quickly became widely known as your view of the Palestinian problem. And you've always been resolutely opposed to a two-state solution. Do you think that kind of rhetoric helps? And do you not think now that the only way out of this, actually, is to have a two-state solution?
True.
I totally disagree. I think...
I'm sorry, man, but if you continue to occupy a people, you continue to make it so the conditions you have created, make it so the conditions around their economic status is repugnant. And that isn't just due to the Israeli government, but that is in large part due to the Israeli government. Whether it was taking Palestinian olive fields by settlers, whether it's the blockade, whether it's any number of issues that's continuing to contribute to Palestinian destitution. Again, not just the Israeli government, certainly contributes to it. And you occupy them and do everything in the world to deny them a state, as the vast majority of the world recognizes that the Palestinians deserve a state. The Israeli government has recognized them as a negotiating party, different Palestinian groups. They recognize there's a big difference between Palestinian values, Israeli values, the Palestinian nationality, the Israeli nationality, their wishes, their hopes, their dreams, and their political differences. And so it seems like the easiest solution, and the one that would be in line with international law, which Israel has been blatantly violating by continuing the occupation, would be to give the Palestinians a state and find some long-term compromise and not perpetuate this conflict in perpetuity, which seems to be Netanyahu's government's position. And if this is the position of him, then it would also be his position, the position of Naftali Bennett.
What people don't realize, and I think that you gave me a good opportunity now, Piers, to emphasize.
By the way, this doesn't even mean that you have to give like the West Bank to Hamas, where that Hamas is going to stay forever, and they're going to be like, you can do things to undermine the political power of Hamas and I've said this before, and make it so other Palestinian political actors that don't, go into southern Israel and start mowing down everyone, whether it be Fatah or any other organization, has successes in our negotiations with the Israeli government to show that there is a peaceful alternative, whether that be the returning of occupied territory in the West Bank to the Palestinian administration in the West Bank, whatever it would be, ending of the blockade, whatever it would be, whatever victories that they would give to Fatah. I guess ending of the blockade would probably not be. It would be the land being turned over. I'm not even going to say what it would or would not be, because with this Israeli government, I don't think they would do either. That's why I don't really trust this Israeli government to do an invasion of the Gaza Strip. I don't really know of any Israeli government currently that I would trust to carry out this type of invasion. My point is, though, there's other ways to find compromise with groups outside of Hamas. If you listen to the language that they're using to talk about Hamas, to attack Hamas as an ISIS-style organization, they're not the only party. They're not the only party in Palestinian politics. So if your objection to negotiating with the Palestinians is, well, look what the Palestinians just did, you're already down in the mud. You're already getting sucked into the quicksand of the framing, because Hamas is not the Palestinian population. The Palestinian population is the Palestinian population. That could be the PLO. That could be Hamas. That could be Fatah. That could be any number. It could be communists. It could be any number of, it could be libtards like us. The point is, there's other options.
We provided the Palestinians with a full-blown Palestinian state in Gaza. In 2005, since I think most of your viewers do not know this, Israel pulled out of Gaza, pulled out all its soldiers, pulled out all the Israelis living there, 8,000 Israelis, handed the keys to the Palestinian Authority. There was no siege, no blockade, nothing. And they had the opportunity to turn their state into Singapore. And from the very first moment, Piers, they began shooting rockets, firing rockets at our towns. Since then, we've had tens of thousands of rockets from the very Gaza that we evacuated. So they had the full opportunity, and they blew it. We did the same thing in Judea and Samaria, aka the West Bank. During Oslo Accords, we pulled out of all the major cities, Ramallah, Nablus, Hebron, Jenin, gave the keys to the PA, and what we got from year 2000 and on was a barrage of suicide attacks in Tel Aviv and Haifa and Jerusalem. So what I've learned, I'm a very simple guy. I look at the facts, and by the way, all Israelis, the overwhelming majority of Israelis agree. Every time we hand land over to them, give them the responsibility and the keys, they turn it into a terror base against us. So how stupid can we be to try this failed approach for the fourth and fifth time? We need a different approach.
I don't think the Israeli government, at least whether it was Sharon's government or Netanyahu's government, has ever seriously approached the two-state issue with an attempt to achieve it. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think Netanyahu has been pretty open about not wanting a two-state solution. And if you leave this issue on the sidelines in perpetuity, eventually something will continue to spark the violence. And the other solution would be what? What's the other solution outside of making a deal with the Palestinians? Just like endlessly intervening into the Gaza Strip? Endlessly intervening into the West Bank? What's the other solution? Actually, you know what? I could tell you what the other solution might be. I don't know if you guys saw this, but there's a think tank, an Israeli think tank, that has put forward basically a proposal to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip, saying that the October 7th attack, which killed 1,500 Israelis, gives the Israeli government a rare opportunity to use the escalation in violence to go into Gaza and evacuate the civilian population. Let's read a little bit of this article. The Misgav Institute for National Security and Zionist Strategy, an Israeli think tank, published a paper last week stating that thanks to the vicious Hamas attacks on October 7th, there is currently a unique and rare opportunity to evacuate the entirety of the Gaza Strip. There is no doubt that in order for this plan to be enacted, many conditions need to exist in parallel. At the moment, these conditions exist, and it is unclear when such an opportunity will arise again, if at all. The think tank advocates a bizarre scheme in which Israel would ethnically cleanse the entirety of Gaza and pay Egypt to house its former inhabitants in currently empty apartments near Cairo. Basically, they want to increase the worldwide percentage of displaced Palestinians, ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip, and make it so that not 1 out of every 3 internationally displaced person is a Palestinian, but 1 out of every 2 internationally displaced persons is a Palestinian. That's the plan. This is ethnic cleansing. This is a war crime. This is collective punishment. The list of atrocities goes on. If this is the position of the Israeli government, I don't know. This is a think tank. Now, to be clear, the think tank is headed by Mir Ben Shabbat, and he served for 4 years as Israel's chief of staff for national security under the Netanyahu government, who appointed him. So it's not like this is just some random think tank YouTube channel, right? Like, I don't know, it's a Twitter space where, I don't know, like 19 to 23-year-olds have just come together to discuss geopolitics. This is somebody this is an organization headed by somebody who was tied to the Netanyahu government. Now, again, I don't know what Israel's follow-up plan is. They have not been very open about their follow-up plan. But when I see proposals like this floating around, which is a call for ethnic cleansing, which is the soft word for genocide, I get extremely concerned. I get extremely worried, especially when the Biden administration is saying things publicly like, we don't have a red line for Israel. There should always be a red line for everyone, including your allies. There should always be a red line somewhere, especially when the Israeli government has been more than callous when it comes to civilian casualties, has been more than callous when it comes to its rhetoric, when there's Knesset members who are openly calling for the collective punishment of the Gazan population, when you've got the president of the UN, Arturo Gutierrez, calling out the Israeli representative at the UN for collective punishment, before he then went into a hissy fit. Not the UN president, the Israeli representative at the UN. Saying there's no red line to the Israeli government, as long as Biden isn't saying anything different privately, just basically looks like a go ahead, do whatever, the reins are in your hands. It's extremely irresponsible rhetoric from the Biden administration. It wasn't Biden who said it, but it was a White House official, and White House officials represent the president, which is Biden. So ultimately, that statement falls at the feet of Joe Biden, which has started a trend online of people calling him Genocide Joe. I gotta say, outside of the obvious humanitarian implications, right? Let's say that you don't care about that for a moment, that you don't care about the humanitarian implications that I care about. Let's talk about the national security implications. I do not believe we are inspiring love for the United States by providing Israel with the bombs that it uses to bomb Gaza. And if the Israeli government goes into Gaza into a ground campaign, which turns into a month-long slog and then year-long occupation, and again, we're just guessing exactly what they're going to do because they haven't been exactly clear. I do not believe that the world is going to respond to that situation by saying, wow, you know what? The American-backed Western, quote-unquote, global order, the rule-based international order, it seems to really follow its own rules. It seems to not be hypocritical at all. I love that order. I love the United States. Do you think that this is going to inspire more love for the United States in the region and improve our relationship with the Arab world? Or do you think it's going to worsen our perception in the region and worsen our relationship with the Arab world? I'm not the only person who has brought this up. I know my friend Patrick Hillsman has brought this up. I know other journalists have brought this up. It's a real concern. And we're watching our reputation turn into shatters. I mean, be shattered as we speak. Not that our reputation was exactly the most swimmingly in the region, but you can always get worse. You can always get worse. The Arabs already hate us because they love Russia. That's really oversimplifying the Arab community. For example, if you're a Syrian there's a good chance, definitely if you're part of the Syrian diaspora, or if you're in rebel-held Idlib, that you despise the Russians, because the Russians bombed and killed thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Syrians in a very brutal bombing campaign, and supported the Assad regime in its butchering. And Assad has killed way more people than anyone else involved in the Syrian civil war. I don't think those people particularly like Russia.